You may not think of research as a critical component of technical writing, and that may be because you think of research as something that takes place mostly at school. But the truth is that research is vital to most technical writing situations. And you're actually aware of that fact if you think about it. One of the first things you had to do in this class was research job opportunities so that you could write an effective and targeted resume and cover letter. Technical writing is almost always based on specific kinds of information, and to get specific information, you usually have to conduct research. But it's true that research works somewhat differently in technical writing contexts than in academic writing, although really almost any real-world application of research is going to work differently than the research you've done for school assignments. The main difference is that research in the real world, and research in real technical writing contexts, is never just a requirement for the sake of a requirement. You probably all had to write papers in which the instructor required you to use sources, even though you were fairly certain that you could write the paper without those sources. Maybe you've even done what I did a couple of times when I was in school. Namely, wrote a paper and then found some sources that I could just insert into the already written draft. It should go without saying that that's not really research. It's just jumping through a hoop that a teacher set for you. It's pretty close to meaningless, and it's a big reason why so many students are cynical about the research process in general. In technical writing contexts, research, like any other element, should only play a role in your writing process if it's necessary. But of course, it often is necessary, and it's definitely necessary for your recommendation report. If you're going to convince your audience that the problem you've identified is serious and worth their attention, you're probably going to have to do some research into that problem. And if you're going to recommend a specific solution to that problem, then you're probably going to have to do some research into that solution. How do you know the problem is serious? Is the problem unique to your organization, or is it a problem that other organizations have faced, whether that's other businesses, other communities, or other colleges? How do you know that the solution you're proposing will work? What kinds of consequences, positive and negative, should the audience expect from your solution? And maybe most importantly, how much is this going to cost? All of that information is likely to come from your research process. The research process itself isn't significantly different for technical writing than it is for any other kind of writing. As always, you need to identify the questions you're asking, think about where you might find the information to answer that question, evaluate the answers you find, and organize your information in some way. One of the most common missteps in research is thinking of it as searching for information about a topic rather than as searching for the answers to questions. Before you start researching, you need to figure out what it is you're trying to find. The most common way that people start research, which is simply going to Google and typing in the topic of your paper, usually isn't the most efficient way to start your research. Instead, think about what you really need to know. The sample recommendation report I posted, for example, addresses the problem of declining workplace productivity by proposing that the company start using standing desks instead of traditional desks. But if you were to go to Google and just type in standing desk, you're going to find mostly ads or articles ranking the best and worst standing desks. If instead you spend a few minutes thinking about what you really need to know, like do standing desks increase productivity, then you can search for that question, or some form of the question anyway, and you'll get much more specific results, including articles that directly address the link you're looking for. Always think of research as an attempt to answer a question, or more likely, many different questions, rather than just an attempt to find sources on a topic. Once you've formulated your research questions, it's usually a good idea to think about where you're most likely to find information that will help you answer the question. In many cases, Google may be your best bet. It is, after all, the most powerful research tool in the history of the world. That doesn't mean that it's always the best place to look for your answers, though. Let's say you wanted to write a report about the need for better lighting in the parking lots on campus. You might want to know about past crime reports at Weatherford College. Google won't have that information, but our campus police will. Or maybe you want to write a report recommending bike lanes be added to major streets in your town. You might want to know about the town budget to figure out how feasible your recommendation is. Again, Google probably won't have that information, but the mayor's office might. In English 1302, you probably learned about primary and secondary research. As a quick reminder, primary research is research you do by finding direct sources of information, like interviews and surveys, for example, while secondary research means using someone else's research by looking at published reports and articles, etc. Both types of research are fine, of course. I just bring it up to remind you that research doesn't have to mean looking at websites. It might mean calling someone who has the information you need. No matter where you get your information, you need to think critically about it and make sure that the information is credible. That's a term I'm sure you've encountered in other English classes, but here again, it's worth thinking about what it means for a technical writing context specifically. Credibility is really just another word for trustworthiness. In other words, you want to make sure that your readers will trust that your information is correct. That's why in my previous example, you'd want to ask the campus police about recent crime reports rather than asking, say, me. I might tell you that as far as I know, the campus is perfectly safe. But I'm not a trustworthy source on this topic because I don't know what I'm talking about. Similarly, if you were writing that sample recommendation report about standing desks, you might not want to use health claims that you find on the Standing Desk Company website because that source isn't unbiased. Whenever you find information that looks like it might be useful, ask yourself, do I trust this source to be accurate, knowledgeable, and unbiased? Or, more specifically, will my readers trust this source? I want to say just a quick word about managing your research process. We've probably all had the experience of finding what looks like a promising source only to lose track of it as you go on to look for other information. Or maybe that's just me. I know that in the past, I spent a lot of time searching my web browser history to find one source that I was looking at 3 or 4 days ago, but have only a vague memory of. That's no way to manage your research process. I'm not going to be prescriptive here and say that there's a right way to manage your research. The right way is whatever way works for you. But the wrong way is not managing it at all and hoping it all works out. What I will say is that the time you spend managing your research process while you're actually doing it will save you lots of time when you start actually writing the report. There are lots of good technological tools out there to help you manage your research. I use Evernote, which is a free and very powerful note-taking and organization program. You may have used Microsoft OneNote before, which I think you have access to for free as part of your WC student account. There are even much more powerful, dedicated research programs like Zotero. And of course, there are good old-fashioned notebooks, which might work just fine for you. Whatever you use to keep track of your research, just be diligent about it. Write down or copy everything that you think you might even possibly need, and where you found that information, so that you don't have to frantically search for that important piece of information on the day that your report is due. Overall, just take your research seriously. Remember, you're not doing research to satisfy some teacher's requirement here. You're doing research because the success of your recommendation, that is, whether the organization adopts your recommendation or not, may well depend on the quality of the information that you provide in your report. If you have any questions, let me know.